You just maxed out your Google Drive storage again. And now Google wants $100 a year? That's more expensive than just buying a 2 terabyte external hard drive. But if you forget that at home, now you don't have access to that data until you get back. But why can't you have both? Well, you can with a NAS, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Everything from what a NAS is to what you can do with your NAS, all you need to know before buying one, and why it might just make enough sense to finally get you away from cloud storage. Let's get started. First, what is a NAS? It's just storage that can be accessed through your network. That's why it's called network attached storage. I know, creative. So as long as you're connected to your network, you're able to access it to upload and download files from whichever device you want, whether you're connected to the wall or Wi-Fi. Some people might confuse this with like a server, which is something completely different. Now here's the funky thing about all of this. Many NAS boxes you can buy actually could run server apps too. So yeah, the terms kind of all blend together, since technically a NAS is a server, but not all servers are NASs. Kind of like how all iPads are tablets, but not all tablets are iPads. Whoa, Jimmy, why would anyone consider a NAS when things like cloud storage exists that can be accessed from anywhere and whatever they own? Great question. Cloud storage is super convenient and easy to set up and use. Like, I'd recommend that stuff to my non-techie friends and family members. Literally just download the app and set up an account. Yeah, done. It's that easy. But it can also be extremely limiting if you think about it. It relies on how fast your internet connection is, and the more storage that you need, the higher the cost. And this cost will go on for your entire digital life for as long as you stay a digital hoarder. Basically, cloud storage is the equivalent of renting a storage unit, except they won't pawn off your old memes on TV. And then there are some people that will go the exact opposite route. They buy a ton of different hard drives, and now they don't know what files are on which drives anymore, and have to maintain a mechanical library and make sure the drives are working occasionally, or else all the data is lost. You wouldn't have that problem if you got cloud storage instead, because it's so easy to maintain and keep track of all of your files if you organized them correctly the first time. But a NAS is that sweet, sweet middle ground between those two options. You own your storage, it can be fast like an external drive, and you can actually access it from anywhere like cloud storage. And most NAS boxes can run self-hosted apps that act like a server. But there are huge cons to a NAS as well. Just like cloud storage, there is a cost. A NAS can get very expensive, but in a very different way. Most of the cost of a NAS is upfront because it is a physical machine that you have to purchase pieces for that you need to configure to make sure it does what it's supposed to do. And it also takes a bit more maintenance than something like cloud storage. So really all these options have their pros and cons. A NAS is just that middle ground that takes some of the main benefits of both of them and puts them together, and has some of their negatives as well. Okay, so if you stayed this long into the video, you're probably thinking, yeah, that's me. A NAS? Put me in, coach. Now what? Well, you got to figure out what kind of NAS you want. Let's start with a few options available. There are many pre-built NAS brands in this space, like Synology, QNAP, TerraMaster, ASUSTore, Ugreen, and Ubiquiti. We don't have time to go through all of them, but they all got something going on for them that you might find interesting. But for me, I'm going to focus on the brands that I have firsthand experience using, like Synology. They're the leader in the consumer space. They make NAS boxes that can pretty much suit whatever your situation is. They have great software that's easy to use. Like, I would argue they have the most user-friendly yet feature-packed NAS software by far. It's also my favorite NAS OS because of that. But for the price that you're paying, Synology hardware is mediocre at best. And starting with any of their models that end in 25, they no longer support using whatever hard drive you want, meaning you're forced into using their approved drives, which usually don't provide much benefit to you as a user, but just cost way more. This has really turned a lot of Synology owners off Synology NASs and makes me personally hesitant to ever buy a new one when my current one dies. Then there's Ubiquiti, which just recently got into the NAS game and currently only has one NAS. It's a budget-friendly option for how many drive bays you get. It fits on a server rack if you have a server, and has a clean and very simple to understand UI, and works beautifully, especially when paired with other Ubiquiti products. I have a whole home Ubiquiti networking setup, and their NAS fits right in, both aesthetically and software-wise. But it's a very traditional NAS. Besides being storage and providing a few backup options and stats, there's not a ton of additional features like you'd find on many other brands. It's great for what it is, a network-attached storage, and I hope to see more options and features as they grow out their offerings. Then there's Ugreen. We'll talk about their pros and cons as well, but I want to disclose that they are today's sponsor with their DH4300 Plus. The Ugreen DH4300 Plus is Ugreen's entry-level NAS with 4 drive bays that support support up to a total of 120 terabytes of storage so that you can begin to lean off cloud storage. This NAS is focused on being beginner friendly, so you can just tap your phone on the NFC label and then log in directly from there. But I love that their app lets you do most of the things you normally would do directly in the web UI, like view the status of the NAS, view your photos and videos, and update the NAS and its apps, all in this one app. You can also access all of your files fast on Windows, Mac OS, Android, and iOS. It is so much more than just a simple storage solution. For example, with the Cloud Drive tool, it's easy to sync between Google Drive and your NAS for a backup. And then the sync and backup tool lets you sync up with other Ugreen NASs or your computer. And there's even a Photos app, which has built-in AI smart classification capabilities to manage and group your photos. If your networking is equipped for it, the DH4300 Plus also has a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port, meaning you can transfer a 1 gigabyte file in just several seconds. I've personally used this thing as a backup Plex server and as my offsite backup to this point, and it's been great at that. It's so nice having a low-cost option to store my large files. So if you're interested in Ugreen's DH4300 Plus, check out the link in the video description below, and thanks again to Ugreen for sponsoring this portion of the video. Ugreen, like Ubiquiti, is relatively new in this space, but in just a year and a half, they have a very fleshed out lineup of NASs that rivals Synology's, but with better hardware inside their boxes, and their boxes genuinely do feel nicer too. Their biggest downside though is their software. While it's improved very fast and feels so different than it was a year ago, it's nowhere near the level of Synology in terms of features or polish. But before we move on, there is one other additional option that might be interesting to you, but will require a lot more trial and error, tinkering, and your patience. And that's building your own NAS. A NAS, at the end of the day, let's be real here, is just a computer. So there's custom operating systems like TrueNAS and Unraid that you can run on a random computer you own to, well, turn it into a NAS. There's a huge learning curve to doing this, so just keep that in mind. You'll be reading a lot if you know nothing about it. I'll be 100% honest though, I have not gone down that route, but I have considered it. It'd make a pretty good video, huh? If you want an even more simpler solution, you can even turn your Mac or Windows PC into a NAS with built-in software on those operating systems. But the really nice thing is, some of these pre-built NASs that you can purchase from TerraMaster, Ugreen, and QNAP can run other operating systems too. So if you don't want to spend the time to build out your own and figure things out, you could go that route too. The real focus of this video though is more on the pre-built boxes, but a lot of the things I talk about will kind of relate to building your own too. Whoa. I might be moving a little too fast. Let's stop right here. Before you pick a NAS from any of these manufacturers, or when you decide to build your own, there are a ton of things to think about, like size. Because when it comes to storage, size really does matter. Okay, what I mean by this is how many drive bays that you end up with. You'll find NASs that range from 2 drive bays to, well, 16 or even more if you're that crazy and don't have a budget. And there's even units that take all kinds of different drive sizes, like regular 3.5-inch sized hard drives, smaller 2.5-inch hard drives or SSDs, and NVMe SSD slots. And while it might be tempting to look at that low price tag of a 2-bay NAS unit and go, I think this might be it, it might not be worth choosing, especially as your first NAS, because it will fill up super quick. Okay, let's just imagine this hypothetical situation, right? Let's just say you buy 2 drives, you slap them into your NAS. Once you filled all that up, you're now out of room. And then your only option becomes buying another NAS that you'll have to maintain, or buying larger hard drives and just figuring out how to move all your data around from that NAS to those hard drives without destroying it all and making sure that you put the new drives into that NAS. That's not fun. With 4 or more drive bays, once you're out of space, you can just plop in another drive and you get even more space. There's more reasons why you want more than 2, but we'll talk about that in a bit. But the next important thing you need to know when buying a NAS is what kind of ports your NAS has. Some have HDMI ports if you're thinking about using that as a dedicated media server. Many have USB ports so you can plug in external drives. And most importantly, almost all of them have an Ethernet port, which is how you're going to connect to your network to be able to access your NAS. Okay, since this Ethernet port is just going to be so important, we're going to have to talk about how NAS performance works. The first is the Ethernet port. See, Ethernet, while they all kind of sort of look similar, are all built differently with different speeds. The most common ones you'll see on a NAS are 1 gigabit, 2.5 gigabit, 5 gigabit, and 10 gigabit Ethernet. Since Ethernet is how you would connect to your NAS, these Ethernet port speeds can be a major bottleneck to your entire setup. There are 8 bits in a byte, so 1 gigabit is equal to 125 megabytes. So if you limit yourself to a 1 gigabit connection, you're not getting anything faster than the speed of a single hard drive, despite having so many different hard drives in your NAS. And this applies across all of your devices too. If your network switch only has 1 gigabit, everything connected to that will only get up to 1 gigabit if that hasn't been shared. If your computer only has 1 gigabit, that computer won't get speeds past that. I made an entire video of being a beginner on the home networking space, and I dig into this a bit too. So check that out if you're interested. There's lots of useful stuff that kind of applies to this video too. But the point is, unless everything that sits between your NAS and the device you're using is fast, then you'll be limited by the slowest point of the entire connection. Now, I'm not saying go out there and make sure everything you own is 10 gigabit enabled. I'm just saying make sure that the speed of your NAS matches or can provide enough for the devices that you do plan to connect to them. I do think when it comes to NASs and regular everyday people, 10 gigabit is kind of overkill. It's more for businesses, and also it's still a little bit pricier than everything else. But at the same time, I think 1 gigabit these days, it's just slow. So I would aim for something between 2.5 and 5. Then there's the actual processor inside the NASs, which control their day-to-day operations, runs the extra apps you might want to run, and determines how fast you can read or write from the NAS. This is going to differ from model to model, and there's so many different models of NASs out there. So this is the hardest spec to really showcase, but you can get a general idea from other people's benchmarks or the internet for whatever model you're interested in. And lastly, it depends on what drives you plan to place in the NAS. Depending on models, the most common drive bays you'll see are 3.5-inch bays for hard drives, 2.5-inch bays for hard drives and SSDs, and M.2 slots for NVMe SSDs. Each storage type has its own purpose. Hard drives are high capacity and cheap compared to SSDs, and you can purchase hard drives all the way up to 30 terabytes if you're willing to shell out for that. And their biggest problem is that they are just so darn slow. That's why in pretty much every computer that you buy today, it comes with flash storage like an SSD, because they are significantly faster than hard drives. There's the SATA SSDs that use the same connectors hard drives use, and there's NVMe SSDs which plug into the M.2 slots. And overall, modern day NVMe drives are just significantly faster than SATA SSDs, to the point that it just might be faster than what your NAS can handle, but they cost roughly the same as SATA SSDs. Sadly, you don't find a ton of these M.2 slots in everyday NASs, but they help a lot. And if you're someone who actively works on a bunch of different files, constantly using the files on that drive, or do something like edit video projects directly off of it, in those situations, having some SSDs in your NAS would be a good idea. But if all you're doing is storing old files that you might need but don't need all the time, or storing your family photos or videos, plain old hard drives are going to be your best bet. They're just so cheap and can store so much. Now, how you pair this storage together and how many of each hard drive or SSD you'll want to buy will all depend on what you want to do with them and in what kind of arrays you'll want to put them in. To make it easy to understand, drive arrays are how drives are grouped together and makes them both faster and more reliable. How does that make any sense though? In most arrays, once a file is written to these drives, that file gets split off into chunks that then goes out to each of the different drives in that array. By doing this, it makes writing and reading from these disks a bit faster because there's less for each drive to do. But there's some things to think about because there's so many different types of drive arrays. The most common ones that you'll see are RAID, SHR, and ZFS. RAID you'll find on so many different NAS boxes, and this is basically a list of different ways to use your drives. RAID 0 would just take all of your drives, combine all the storage together, and you're ready to go. This is the fastest form of RAID with the most storage because it's basically just treating all of your drives as a giant beefed up combined super drive. But the major problem with the RAID 0 is that if any single drive fails, all your data is done. It's dead. That's very scary. Then there's RAID 1, which just means you have 2 total drives with one acting as parity, meaning if one of those 2 drives dies, the second one is an exact copy of the first, so you can just keep on chugging and replace the dead drive to fix it. The thing is, these parity drives do not contribute to the overall storage, so you lose all the space to these drives as parity. So as an example, right, if you have 2 8TB hard drives in RAID 1, you'll only have 8 terabytes of usable storage, not 16. And then there's RAID 10, which is a combination of RAID 1 and RAID 0. So I guess my first grade teacher was wrong. 1 plus 0 is 10. I'm writing a letter, I need an update to my grades. RAID 10 splits the drives into pairs and makes each pair exact copies of each other. So if you have, for example, 8 drives, you have 4 pairs. This way, if any drive from each of the pair dies, you're okay. But if both drives from a single pair dies, just like RAID 0, it's gone. So here's where it gets easier. The last two are RAID 5 and 6. RAID 5 is just one single drive becomes parity. So if a single drive in that array fails, any of the drives, your data's still okay. RAID 6 is that 2 drives become parity, meaning if you have 8 drives and 2 fails, you'll still be okay. You might think, wait a minute, RAID 6 sounds like the best bet, right? Like any 2 drives can fail? That sounds like the best option. See, here's the problem. RAID 6, while very versatile when it comes to drive failures, is also the slowest of the bunch because the poor processor in your NAS is coughing and wheezing trying to make sure all of your data is split across all your drives and that there's enough redundancy that 2 drives can fail. So regardless of whichever RAID option you pick, each one is great for different reasons and for different purposes. To make things easier for you though, a good starting point would be if you have 2 drives, RAID 1, 3 drives, RAID 5, 4 drives, RAID 5 if they're small, and RAID 10 if they're large. If you have 6 or more drives, do RAID 6. If they're large drives and you don't mind losing a bit of capacity, again, RAID 10. Okay, now that you understand the basics of RAID, it makes explaining these special formats a little easier. If you end up going with Synology, they have their own array types called SHR. There's SHR1 and SHR2, and these are basically just RAID 5 and 6, but with one special new unique feature. Unlike RAID, where if you use different sized drives, they'll all become the smallest one in that array, meaning the most optimal RAID path is using drives that are all around the same size. SHR lets you combine whatever drives you want together with the largest drive becoming parity. ZFS has options similar to RAID, but has many more features that make it more resilient to failure than standard RAID. I don't have too much experience with ZFS, so that's my best explanation of it. You can find ZFS on TrueNAS and some other NAS brands, just not the ones that I'm using today. Okay, so now that you have a general idea of what options are out there, you can now select the best drives for what you're personally aiming for. My own recommendations is that you get some reputable drives made for NASes, like WD Red Plus or Red Pros. Don't get the regular WD Reds, those aren't as great for NAS operations. WD Ultrastars are also great, or you can go the Seagate route and get Iron Wolves or Exos drives. These are all hard drives that are made to be left on 24/7, while the longevity of regular hard drives might not be as good. Regardless of budget, I'd really recommend getting the largest size drives that you possibly can up front, because you can very quickly run out of room. Imagine buying 4 4TB hard drives, maxing out a NAS, and then being forever stuck with 12 terabytes of storage in RAID 5. That would suck. And that was me way back then. I've learned my lesson, I promise. But if instead you bought 2 12TB hard drives, sure, it's a little bit more expensive up front, but now you have 2 slots left to later expand it with more 12TB drives, which I can guarantee you is a lot easier to deal with than buying a whole new NAS and having to maintain 2. On the SSD side, you can really pick out any reliable SSDs out there to put in your NAS. This is for both SATA and NVMe drives. I would buy at least 2 though, just so that you can put them in RAID. You don't want to put SSDs and hard drives in the same RAID array because that really just completely defeats the purpose of having an expensive SSD in there in the first place. Most NASes will enable you to create different storage pools for your SSDs and your hard drives so that even though they're in the same unit, they can be permanently separated digitally through software. Or you could even create additional pools with different size hard drives in one and then different size hard drives in the other. Basically, storage pools just give you a lot more flexibility. Okay, so now that you bought all your drives, all you need to do is slap them into your NAS that you decided on, connect your NAS to your network, and follow the directions that came with it. Typically, this means finding the IP address that your NAS is connected to and typing it in on your internet browser. Some NAS makers even have a nice little web tool that will help you connect to them too. From there, most NASes will show you how to set up your storage pools. The NAS might take a bit of time to build your array, but it's usable without it being completely built, just slower. From there, look through your NAS's settings and try to find the SMB function and turn that on. This will allow you access to it from your other devices. After that, you're basically done. You got a fully working NAS. Now what? Well, if all you wanted was storage, that's it. You're good. Play around with the operating system, set up users beside yourself if you need to, and start storing some of your files. Awesome, you basically built a Google Drive that only works when you're at home. Cool. Wait, that's not as versatile as cloud storage that can be used almost anywhere. But see, most of these NASes come with app stores where you can download additional apps that you can run directly on the NAS. And if these app stores don't have the app that you're looking for, a lot of the apps that you download and use are self-hosted, meaning it doesn't exist on the internet, only on your NAS and within your network. Obviously, we won't go through all the different apps that might be available, but let's talk about some of the ones that I've been using that would be very beneficial for someone with a NAS and trying to connect to it. The first one is Tailscale. Tailscale lets you basically access your NAS from anywhere if you have it installed on both your NAS and your phone, tablet, computer, streaming device, whatever. It's basically a VPN that only connects your device to anything else that has Tailscaled installed on it. Super neat and useful if you want to be able to access your stuff from anywhere. This comes in handy when I want to download YouTube footage that I shot and I forgot that I left on the NAS and never downloaded to an external drive that I brought with me, like my laptop. And it's also useful on like a vacation when I took a bunch of photos and I want to upload them directly to my NAS. If you have a huge media library, there's Plex or Jellyfin that you can use to watch your movies or TV shows that you have stored on your NAS. And with Tailscale, you can easily access those apps from outside your home too. And then there's apps like Image for photo management. It's basically like a self-hosted Google Photos. And then there's Home Assistant, basically a way to consolidate all of your smart home stuff under a single platform and to create and run intricate smart home automation. Those are just some of the apps I use. There are so many more options out there. It's pretty limitless. Whatever you think you can do on a computer, you can probably do it on this Linux-based NAS. Okay, we're deep into this video, but there are still several things I want to talk about that you might find useful about your NAS. So you can actually plug in external hard drives directly into them and then access these same external drives over your network, just like the rest of your NAS. You should also consider making sure you use strong security, like two-factor authentication, strong passwords. You shouldn't expose unnecessary ports on your NAS to the internet, stuff like that. And lastly, get a UPS. No, not the shipping company. An uninterruptible power supply. Basically, these are bulky power strips with built-in batteries that turn on the moment your power cuts out. Don't think that you'll get hours of usage off of these things. These things are more meant to power your stuff for a few minutes to help them shut down safely. But if you do anticipate being in prolonged power outages, then you should make sure to connect the USB cable that came with your UPS and connect it to your NAS and configure it through its setting. This way, your NAS will automatically shut down before the UPS runs out of power. You don't want your NAS just shutting down randomly in the middle of it doing stuff, because that could mean that you lose some data. Fair warning though, UPSs use lead-acid batteries, kind of like cars, so they don't last forever and you do have to replace their batteries every few years. Okay, at this point you might think we're done, but we're not. We're not. Some people might be thinking of using their NAS as some sort of backup. And that's fine, as long as you have multiple copies of your stuff saved to different places. But there's this backup strategy called the 3-2-1 backup method. And while the definition of it does change with the times, we can take some of the best practices from this strategy and apply it to how we manage our own data as well. Basically, we just want to make sure that we have 3 copies of any data that you think is super important, with at least one of those copies being offsite. So anywhere else in the world that the other 2 copies aren't. So let me give you an example. This is probably how most people currently do it. Look at your phone. This probably has precious, memorable family photos on them. That's great. We're enjoying life's greatest moments with the people that we care about most. So because of this, you made sure you backed those things up, whether that be Google Photos or iCloud, whatever. It's in the cloud, just in case. But while it's great that you backed it up and is technically an offsite backup, you still only have 2 copies. And honestly, for most people, this is a great start, especially if you're budget conscious. But for more redundancy, you really should have some other form of backup too. So like a NAS would make a great third backup location. But that problem could get even worse if you're someone like me who uses their NAS as their primary storage. So I work off of my NAS by connecting my computers to it and treating it like a giant shared drive across all of my main computers. That means I need 2 more backups because that NAS I'm using is basically just a giant drive for all of my crap. It's not a backup. That's my main drive. So I laid out a few options that could technically be your backup solution based on your own needs and budgets. The cheapest option is, realistically here, you don't even need a NAS. If you don't have a huge digital life and stay pretty lean, just occasionally back up all of your important stuff to external drives and be sure to have them backed up to cloud storage too. That's it. That's easy. But a large chunk of you guys that came to this video came here to get off of cloud storage and to store dozens of terabytes of data because, like me, we got data problems. A budget conscious option to do that would be to just back up all of your device's data to a NAS and then back up that NAS to a single giant hard drive. You can easily find huge hard drives already in enclosures for pretty decent prices when they're on sale. I remember a while back, someone in my comment section once said that they just have 2 external hard drives that they're constantly backing up to their NAS into, and they just rotate the external drives offsite every few months. I thought this was a great budget-friendly way to get that final offsite storage. If you're someone like me who uses their NAS as their primary storage, that's when you introduce a second NAS to back back up to, and then you can just start the hard drive rotations as your offsite storage. Just find a nice closet at your parents' or other family members' house. I don't think they'd mind. Or if you're too good for that, if you don't want to spend time every few months rotating the drives, you could go the most expensive route, which is another NAS. But let's say you don't have any budget remaining for that, or even to buy 2 big drives to rotate your drives around. Well, there's still an option. It's just gonna be more work, but hey, it could work. Find every old drive that you owned. Old hard drives, SSDs, flash drives. I'm sure you can put together a Frankenstein of storage that's larger than a few terabytes. Then use up the free options on cloud storage like Google Drive or Dropbox. Then back up different folders to each of these different storage options. Obviously, this is the cheapest option and very much doable, but now you gotta remember where every single file is, and it's actually best practice to boot up every drive every once in a while to make sure everything is working right, and this can become a huge headache from just too many things to do. But it is a stopgap solution to rotating hard drives or buying another NAS. It's just not one that I would recommend long term. There's options for every budget, but even if you can't handle 3-2-1 at a bare minimum, please just have at least one backup of your important stuff stored somewhere, anywhere. That's better than nothing, and it shouldn't be neglected. Okay, so now that I've shared pretty much everything someone might need to know about NASs, I wanted to share my own setup to help with inspiration for yourself, because I think my own setup is as complex as you can get for a regular person. I use my NAS as my primary storage. I don't save files onto my computer unless it's temporary or part of the computer's app. Everything else goes directly into my NAS. And my NAS needs to be able to do a few things. I need to be able to edit YouTube videos for this channel on it, so there needs to be some sort of fast SSD storage, but then I also need it to be big enough to hold all of my previous projects and all the different video files associated with running this channel. Alongside, of course, regular documents associated with the channel too. Then I have some personal non-YouTube needs like storing family photos, watching my own media, running home automations, and storing just personal files like cooking recipes or documents for future plans. The entire setup also needs to be backed up, so I still need to be able to follow the 3-2-1 backup strategy, or at least try to follow it as best as I can. So this is what I ended up with. I have an old Synology 8-bay NAS that I use as my YouTube NAS, and a Ugreen DXP 4800 Plus that I use for my personal life. From there, I back up both of these NASs up to the Ubiquiti UNAS Pro and also to my offsite Ugreen DH4300 Plus. This way, my YouTube existence and personal existence are separate, with only the backups where they meet. Now, if you ever go my route, please try to stick to one NAS brand. This makes it really easy to move your files between all of these different devices. But if you decide to have multiple NASs, all from different manufacturers, you need to know that they all have their own backup tools that make it hard for them to talk to one another. Like Synology and Ugreen NASs don't like syncing up with other NASs and create a proprietary backup file that can only be used on that brand of NAS. The Ubiquiti NAS was the only one that just straight up backed up and presented it exactly how it's supposed to look, but it lacked many of the other standards available, like backing up to a USB drive because there's no ports, and it was difficult to find a way to back up into it from another NAS because it doesn't natively accept common standards like rsync. It really only allowed you to back up from another Ubiquiti NAS. I tried to think of so many different ways to get this figured out, probably more time than I should have, but the final solution ended up being the best to accomplish this. SyncThing. This is an open source program that you can run on your NASs that keep devices in sync with each other. Some people use it to keep 2 PCs that they're using in sync. Others use it to make sure that their Android phone is in sync with a NAS. There's so many different ways to set this up with so many different options. It's such a simple but powerful tool. I'd highly recommend checking it out if you're struggling with doing the exact same thing I'm doing. Just keep in mind that it does require a bit of tinkering, but it's honestly nothing you can't figure out with an hour or two of just reading into it. Trust me, it's worth it. It automatically syncs all of my primary folders to my other NASs, including my offsite one with the help of Tailscale. So now all of my data is automatically backed up without requiring constant monitoring from me. Okay, so NASs are going to change every single year. So if you're watching this video a few years from it was released, this info might not be as relevant, but I just want to mention a few of my own recommendations for a pre-built NAS for someone just starting out on this journey. I'm mainly going to focus on the brands that I tried because their OSs will at least be similar to what I'm familiar with and have tried out. And it would be wrong of me to suggest anything that I haven't personally tried either. So if you're on an absolute budget, I'd look at the Ugreen DH 4300 Plus. I know they were today's sponsor, but genuinely, it's a lot of NAS for around $400 and great for just sheer storage and some apps. If you have a budget around $400 to $700, this is where things get a bit interesting. If all you care about is storage and none of the extra stuff, get the Ubiquiti UNAS Pro. This thing gives you 7 drive bays to store so much digital clutter that is just hard to find at a $500 price tag. Just keep in mind, if you want to use up all 10 gigabit that this thing offers, you will need to connect it to the SFP port. There's also adapters to convert these to Ethernet if you're plugging it into something else. It's not the fastest for random reads and writes, but for how many drive bays that you're getting and how simple it is to use, it's great. Then the other options are Ugreen's DXP 4800 Plus and Synology's DS 925 Plus. And genuinely, in good conscience, I can't recommend the DS 925 Plus NAS. It's got my favorite operating system and has fantastic apps that just work, but the fact that they lock down the drives you can choose from makes this a very expensive option because Synology hard drives are more expensive than great third-party ones. So if you must go the Synology route, try to find some of their older stuff like the DS 923 Plus, because anything older than the 25 model number will let you use whatever hard drives you want, like that older Synology I'm using. If you're trying to avoid Synology altogether and want third-party app support just like the Synology, I would recommend the Ugreen DXP 4800 Plus. With that machine, you can max out the 10 gigabit Ethernet connection if you put in some NVMe SSDs, or if you don't want to go that route, there are straight up other good options out there from QNAP or TerraMaster that might fit your needs too. There's so many options in this price range. But beyond that $800 price range, this is where you get really powerful NASs with 6 or more drive bays. And from there, you're probably going to get every feature you would want in a NAS. You would get a bunch of different hard drive bays too, 10 gigabit networking, NVMe slots, and powerful hardware. And at that point, it's more on how much you're willing to spend. And honestly, I think the NAS at those sizes are more for people looking to store data for some sort of business and need something more powerful with more drives to meet those business needs. Like maybe they're video editing off of them, maybe they're archiving footage, or they're just storing large important project files for their business. But just keep in mind, with all these NAS systems, drives are typically not included. So just be aware that that is going to be an additional cost that you should add on alongside the price of the NAS. So these things can get expensive very quick, and you should consider the cost of drives within your budget as well when selecting a NAS. Okay, so that's everything that I know about NASs, at least everything someone who's just looking into these might care about. It was a lot of information, and I think this might be my longest video ever. Either way, I'm tired of talking. While this is a ton of information, I hope it answers some of the important questions you had and that you found it useful on your own NAS journey. This really is a resource I wish was available when I looked into this topic myself. And honestly, take your time with it. You can start with just 2 hard drives and add more as you go. And there's still so many things that you can do with your NAS that we didn't talk about in this video. You just have to make the time to tinker with it to accomplish those goals. It becomes a new hobby or a chore depending on how you look at it. Anyway, I think I'm done yapping. Let me know what you personally think though. Did you find this video helpful? How far along are you in your own storage journey? Are you still using cloud storage even with the NAS? Why or why not? What do you think I should do to improve my own NAS situation? I think I'm done with these giant, long, information-dense videos for a while. They require a lot of time to edit and they're so hard to make. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And well, I'll see you all next time. Bye.